Well, hello. My name is Graham. I work here at Real Life also. And to be really honest, thank you, Matthew. To be really honest, I was not supposed to be on this stage this morning. We had our buddy Billy, who's our Brewster campus pastor, was supposed to be preaching, and he got a bad sickness. And so Friday night, he texted and was like, I can't go, man. So yesterday, I spent a little bit of time in my office, and we got something for you today. My wife said, hey, you preached last week. It went really well. Just do that one again. I was like, that is great thinking, but I already got this one ready. Anyways, we are starting a new series today, a relationship series. These tend to be our most popular series every single year, so I'm really excited to get to launch that. And honestly, today's a big day. Today is one of our nation's great holidays. Today is my half birthday. I know most of you have been preparing for the last 6 months for this day, and I appreciate it. We're going to have soup after church today in my honor. If you didn't get me anything, it's okay. It's not too late to Venmo me, okay? Today's my half birthday. I'm either 37 or 38 and a half. I honestly don't remember. But you're like, who celebrates their half birthday? I'll tell you who. Like kids who had summer birthdays growing up and never got to bring like Power Ranger cupcakes to school, all right? We never got to celebrate that. You never got to go through the lunch line and tell the lunch lady it was your birthday and she gave you a sticker. Okay, those are the kids that celebrate half birthdays, like me. I'm just kidding. Today, well, it is my half birthday, but today's also Groundhog's Day. It's that like super weird holiday where we celebrate a bunch of guys dressed, I don't know, in like 1800s clothes, and they pull a rat out of a hole, and then they decide like whether we're gonna have more winter or not. Like, what kind of witchcraft is this? Like, this is like the weirdest thing in the whole world. Groundhog's Day is the weirdest thing. When I grew up, Groundhog's Day was the day that they showed that Bill Murray movie on TV, right? The Groundhog Day movie where he just like relived this terrible day again and again and again. And I don't know about you, but I've had a couple days or a couple instances that have felt like this Groundhog Day. I've felt like Bill Murray, like I've made the same mistake or gone through the same scenario more times than I would like to admit. A few weeks ago, my family and I had a big thing happen in our family. We bought a new minivan. That's big. When you have 4 kids, a minivan is a big deal. Okay, it's a lifeline. All right, our last minivan was whispering to us. That's how my wife liked to say it. She's like, minivan's whispering. She's whispering. She's telling us she's done. So I was like, okay, before we get there, let's go over. So we went over to Seattle, and I had all these vans picked out. I knew what I was looking for, and I had like 6 different lots we were going to go to and try to get the best deal and yada, yada. And we do this thing, and I'm kind of starting to regret it now, but we do this thing sometimes when we go on a road trip where as soon as our kids wake up, they usually wake up about 7, we just take all of them in their pajamas, we put them in the minivan, and we start driving, right? We give them breakfast while they're in there, they stay in their pajamas, and it feels like we get like 2 hours for free. You know, it's like they're still not quite awake yet, all right? But then this happened. 2 hours into our drive, somebody's like, I got to go to the bathroom, and we're like, all right, well, we'll find a spot. So we find this gas station, and Kayla's like, all right, everybody put your shoes on. We're going to go in. And they're all rummaging around in the back seats. And then True, our 10-year-old, says, hey, Mommy, where's my shoes? And Kayla says, I don't know, but they better be on your feet here in a second. And she's like, looking around, she goes, I don't know where they are. And Kayla says, well, where did you put them? She says, I didn't bring any shoes. I thought you were going to bring my shoes. So here I am, giving her a piggyback ride into this gross gas station bathroom so she can go to the bathroom. And now we're like Googling places. We're not going to the car lot, obviously. We're looking like, where is a Ross or a thrift store or something? Because now I have to buy this child shoes before I can spend thousands of dollars on a minivan. Now that's funny. It's less funny because it's not the first time it's happened to us. We were going camping a couple years ago. Different kid, same problem. Hey, Mommy, where's my shoes? I don't know, but they better be on your feet pretty soon. No shoes. We're like, sweetheart, we're going camping. And all you brought was bluey slippers? Like, what did you think was going to happen here? Googling thrift stores, which is a great one in Twisp, by the way, that just happened to have little girls' shoes. So now we have one that we call it's her camping shoes. I've made this mistake. I make a lot of mistakes again and again. Maybe you're like me, you don't have to admit that, but like something comes up and you're like, I kind of know I shouldn't. You know what? This time's going to be different, right? I was getting all these ads in the fall for Temu, which I knew just sells cheap junk from the internet. But I'm like, but it's so cheap. Think of all the Christmas things I could get, right? I could double all the Christmas presents I'm going to get this year. So I buy this stuff off of Temu, and it shows up, and it's just the absolute cheapest junk in the whole world. I'm like, you get a pair of gloves that has like 3 fingers in it. It's like, who am I going to give this to, Bert and Ernie? Like, what do you do with it? It's like, but it's like and I was telling Kayla, I was like, I feel like every 5 to 10 years, some silly, cheap website pops up, and I'm like, this is the one. This one's going to be great. All of a sudden, it's going to be different this time. And we have these things in our lives that, I don't know, like we learn our lessons sometimes with really dumb things. Sometimes we like set some rules in our life so that we don't make those mistakes more than once. I have a couple rules in my life, and honestly, I have been sharing these 2 rules with people for over 10 years now. My hope is that if we all abide by these 2 rules, we will have a better world. Okay? I'm going to share them with you now. It's not the first time I've shared them, but I'm going to share them with you now. The first one is this. There are 2 things that are always beautiful, even when they're not. A newborn baby and an engagement ring. Okay? When you see one of those 2 things, you act like it's the most beautiful thing in the whole world, and we'll save ourselves a lot of heartache, all right? You see her, right? She gets out of the car. You know she got engaged. She's so excited. She's like, look, he went to Jared. And you're like, no, he went to Cracker Jack. Like, that is a terrible ring. But you don't say that, right? Every baby is beautiful no matter what it looks like. Rule number 2, maybe most important rule ever. Don't you ever ask a woman if she's pregnant. Ever. It doesn't matter. If she's got, some space here. It doesn't matter if she's doing the hold that they do, the I'm pregnant hold. It doesn't matter if she has a shirt that says I'm pregnant. Ask me about it, right? Don't you ever ask. There's no win. There's no win. And I've seen it happen. It's happened to my wife. It's super hurtful. It's embarrassing. It happened. I was at a store about a year ago. I was at a store, and the woman in front of me asked the clerk if she was pregnant. She said no, and then started to cry. And then the lady apologizes and says, sorry, have a good day. And then I'm standing there. And I was like, I don't know what to do right now. I just said, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Don't ever, okay? Now, there's 2 exceptions to this rule. 1, if she brings up her pregnancy, you're allowed to talk about it. 2, if a baby falls out of her, you are allowed to talk about it. All right? Those are the only exceptions. Other than that, there's no need. I'll just say this. On behalf of the non-pregnant community, as a representative, I'd like to say, please stop asking. There's no win, okay? These are my 2 life rules. I need to add to this book. It's not very long. And I don't know if maybe you have some things in your life, you have some rules, some things you've set up. Like, seems to me we learn from the mistakes in our areas that matter, in life areas that matter the least, right? We set these rules, like next time I put all those kids in the car, I'm going to check every single foot and make sure it has a shoe on it, okay? Right? Next time it's fantasy football season, I'm not going to draft a quarterback in the first round. I'm going to put a note in my phone, right? Next time I make that recipe, I'm definitely going to add gluten to it, because when you don't add gluten to something, it's terrible, okay? Next time I go and pay $200 for her to cut my hair, I'm going to tell her to take 6 inches off, because I just got I don't even know if she cut it. She just brushed her scissors through it or something, right? We set these rules where we say, next time is going to be different. Next time I'm going to learn my lesson. Next time, and a lot of the times, it's in really silly areas of life. And then sometimes in the most important parts of our lives, we repeat the same mistakes over and over and over. right? We think, and it's kind of easier to see in other people, we're like, why does she always date the same type of guy? She must have a type. No, she's making the same mistake. Why is it that we get in a fight with our spouse over the same issue again or again or again? We repeat the same mistake. Why is it that our mom is nagging us for the same thing over and over and over? Because we're repeating the same mistakes. I think we do this. We're not dumb, right? It's not that we don't care either. We do this because I think that there's some lies, there's some myths that we believe to be true. And because those are kind of deeply rooted in us, they come out in us continuing to make these mistakes. So we're going to look at some of these lies and some of these myths we believe. One of them is there's this myth or this lie that if we've already experienced something, then we must be wiser, right? If I've already gone through something, then I know how to handle it next time. But that's not true. Experience doesn't make you wiser. Experience gives you, check this out, the opportunity to become wiser, but experience doesn't make you wiser, right? All experience does and guarantee is that you will be older. But experience doesn't guarantee that you will be better. It doesn't guarantee you will be stronger. It doesn't guarantee you will be smarter or wiser or anything else. Experience only guarantees that you will be older. Now, I had really the luck of going through the Lake Chelan School District. I had a great experience growing up here. And I can tell you, when I graduated, I could look at one of the best teachers I had in this school district. And they had decades and decades of experience. I could also look at the worst teacher that I had going here, and they had decades and decades of experience. Because experience doesn't make you wiser. It doesn't make you better or stronger. Experience only guarantees that we'll be older. And a lot of times, too, we have this weird thing. I don't know if it's a human thing or an American thing or what it is, but we have this this myth in us that says this time will be different, right? Like, what is that in us that says, oh, this time will be different, right? Like a lot of you students, like you just moved into a new semester, and when it's a new semester, you have like this new attitude, like to try harder again. And it's like, yeah, this semester, I'm going to get A's. Like this semester, I'm going to try. I don't know what that is. Like, and I like New Year's resolutions. Don't get me wrong. I think any opportunity to like make yourself better or set goals is really great. But January is not magical, right? It's not like New Year's Day rolls around and all of a sudden things change, but something inside of us feels like it does. Yeah, I've gone to the same gym long enough to see the same influx January, that first week of January, and by February, we're back to normal, right? This time will not be different. It's just this lie that we tell ourselves, and again, I don't know where it comes from exactly. One thing that I find super interesting, and I'm really convicted of it, is a lot of times we think, because I know better, I will do better, right? Kind of like the lie of experience. Because I know better, I will do better. And I think this is why, like when it comes, especially to relational things, when we get hurt, when we get, maybe there's heartache, maybe there's pain, something like that, and we go to our friends, our family, our small group, whoever it might be, or maybe you go to your parents, and you start explaining what happened. And everybody says the same thing. Before the other person can talk and start giving you advice, we all do this. We go, hey, I know, listen, I know what I should have done. I know I shouldn't have said that. I know I shouldn't have called him. I know I shouldn't have texted. I know I shouldn't have done this. I know I shouldn't have showed. We always act like, oh, we know, so all of a sudden it's like okay. One thing I started saying to my kids a while ago, because, man, kids are really great at this line, I know, Dad, I know, Dad. And I even say, no, you don't know, or you would have done it differently. Now, what they should say from now on is, Dad, know better doesn't equal do better, okay? But I would say, if you knew better, then you would do differently. But that's not necessarily true. A lot of the times, we make the same mistakes over and over and over in relationships, even though we know better. Right? And I'm not just talking about a romantic relationship, in friendships. Why did that last friendship not work? Well, how come this friendship isn't working? How come they let you go at your last business and now this business is letting you go too? How come you seem to struggle in maybe even a romantic relationship? This always seems to be this issue, just keeps coming up. Know better doesn't equal do better. I feel like you don't see this as much anymore, but definitely when I was younger, I thought it was so crazy if you saw a doctor who was smoking. You know? It's like, don't they know? Well, know better doesn't equal do better. And a lot of us, too, we think that time is against us. And so we rush, from one relationship to the next, from one friendship to the next, from one job to the next, whatever it is, because we're running out of time. We have to get moving here. And we believe that time is against us. And listen, we live in a culture that celebrates youth and speed, right? When you watch the Olympics, they always highlight the youngest athletes in there, right? They always say, this kid is 4 years old from Indonesia, right? It's just like, how in the world is a bodybuilder? But they always celebrate the youth, right? And the most popular event, the most watched event in the Olympics is the 100-meter dash. And I think this symbolizes us as a culture. We live in a culture where we celebrate youth and we celebrate speed, and time would be our enemy then. But time is our friend. Time is absolutely our friend. And I know it doesn't feel that way sometimes. You're saying, Graham, my biological clock is ticking. I got to find somebody. Time is not my friend. Graham, all my friends are retiring. They're all retiring young. I need to retire young. Graham, I've only got 2 more years of high school and I'm out of here. Time is not my friend. I'm running out of time, but I promise you time is your friend, especially if you're younger here, listen to me. Especially when it comes to working on yourself before getting married. If you're 25 and under, the time you have right now to develop yourself and work on yourself is it's pure gold. And you don't realize it because you're like, I'm getting older. My friends are starting to get married. I got to get married. We got to have kids. But time is your friend. Now, some people are like, Graham, what do you know? You married your high school sweetheart. You guys were 4 when you got married, right after you were in the Olympics. And it's like, listen, Caitlin and I dated for 5.5 years. That's a long time. And what I'm super grateful for is while we were dating in college, I was in a group of guys. And we were molding and refining and helping and teaching and healing each other before we all got married. And I know I would not be the man, I would not be the husband or the father I am today without those 5.5 years, especially those 4 years in college with those guys around me. When it comes to healing, refining, molding, anything else, they all require time. All of them. And it's best done before you're married. Because listen, hear this. When you get married, you take all of your faults, all of your hurts, habits, and hangups that we say in CR, and you take all of their faults, hurts, habits, hangups, pain, past, and you bake those together into the bread of your marriage. And it is so much harder and destructive to heal and mold and refine once those are already baked together. I really believe that that's why, statistically, couples who get married older have a less chance of divorce. If you get married when you're under 25 years old, you have a 60% chance of getting a divorce. If you wait till after 25, and then every year after this, it goes down, but at 25, your divorce rate is at 25%. You dropped 35% in those 5 years. And I really believe it's because it gives us time to mold and grow and change. And here's why. Time is your friend because you will be able to hear things you can't hear now, see things you can't see now, and own things you can't own right now. We need to be able to hear and see and own things. Now, I've been here at Real Life since we started. I don't remember how long ago that is. Struggling with numbers today. I don't know, 11 or 12 years. Before I worked at Real Life, I worked at a different church. And it didn't end well. Long story short, okay? Let's say it wasn't rainbows and butterflies, like there was no potluck going away party for me, all right? There was some hurt and some pain. There were some things I had to deal with. And I went, and I remember I've seen counselors on and on my whole life, as everyone should. And I went and started meeting with my counselor again, and we started working through these things. And as we were like talking about some of these things, like deeper stuff just kept coming out. And I remember saying to him, I was about a month in, I was meeting with him every week at that point. I was about a month in, I remember saying to him, hey, how long do you think I got here, man? Like another month? Like, what do you think? And I remember what he said to me. He says, Graham, we'll be here for at least a year. And I was like, what? A year? Like, I don't got time for this. Can I tell you something? 2 years later is when he finally kind of gave me the, hey, I think you're doing really well. And because it took that time for me to be able to hear things and see things and own things that I couldn't 2 years prior. Now, here's what's super cool. I'm not making this up. I remember sitting on his couch, and I remember when he said to me, I didn't know it was coming, but he said, hey, Graham, you've made some really great progress. I think we can take a break for a while. And then I made a joke of like, hey, I'm healed, look at me. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, we'll see. But I didn't feel like I was healed. I felt like I'd made progress. And I remember I stood up and I shook his hand and I said, thank you so much for your time, yada, yada. I was excited. I kind of felt like I graduated from something, right? And I turned around and I looked behind me, and behind the couch where I was sitting, he had put up this big picture, I think of like the Grand Canyon. And I looked and I was like, wow, hey, is that new? And he just smiles, he says, no. He says, that's been there the whole time. He says, I got to tell you something though. Constantly when people are done with their little sessions with him, like they've done a season with him, he says, they notice the picture. He said there's something, and he didn't know what it was exactly, but there was something about me being done that allowed me to see the world differently, not just in myself, but everything around me. And it's the first time I ever noticed this picture that had been there the entire 2 years I was there. Because time allows us to hear things and see things and own things that we can't right now. Now, this is super important, because if we don't take the time, we will carry blame into every relationship we go to next, whether that's romantic or our place of work or our friendship or next family member, whatever it is. If we don't take the time to process, we will carry our blame into the next relationship. Blame is the vehicle we use to smuggle our issues into the future. And listen, some of you, I've heard your stories, and you have stories that are not, your pain was not brought on by you. You have scars and wounds, and you carry burdens that somebody else put on you, right? But if we carry our shame around, and we carry this burden of blame, and we wait for someone else to come and ask for forgiveness or admit they were wrong or take it from us, we might be carrying this blame and shame and pain for the rest of our lives. And I know this because I sat in my counselor's office and talked about it. And I said, as soon as they ask for forgiveness, as soon as they admit that they were wrong, as soon as they come and apologize to me, and I remember he looked at me and said, and Graham, what if they never do? Then I will carry this forever. Blame is something we wait for other people to come and solve. So what do we do about this? What do we do about all these lies and these myths that we've told ourselves? These things that we've carried into relationship. I think Paul, as he writes in the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 2, talks about how we have been conformed to the pattern of the world, right? Con is a prefix that means with or together. We are with this form. We are molded to be like the world. And he says, but we need to be transformed by the renewing of our minds so that we will be able to test and approve what God's will is, because he wants good and pleasing and perfect things for us. When we do what the world has told us to do, our society has told us to do, we will get exactly what it has. Right? It's like a cookie cutter, okay? When it says, hey, your happiness should look like this, stamp. Your relationship, your marriage, it should look like this, stamp. Your friendships, they should look exactly like this, stamp. Your high school experience, it should look exactly like this, stamp. And when we do that, we get what everyone else is getting. And for the most part, we think, well, that doesn't sound too bad. But we live in the most depressed, anxious, obese, in debt, overworked society in the history of the world. Not really the mold I'm looking for. Right? And here, let me just hear my youth pastor heart a little bit, because I care about your kids a lot. But if you raise your kids exactly like society tells you to, right? Buy them whatever they want, overfill their schedules, give them technology and social media from a young age, eliminate all obstacles from their path. If you do that, your kids will turn out just like everyone else's kids. Anxious, depressed, unable, scared. There's a couple things in our lives that I just want to go through real quickly that I see forming us to look like the world, right? Social media has the ability to form your desires and contort your view of normal more than anything else. 100%, just hear me. If you struggle with any kind of anxiety or depression, get rid of social media. It will change your life. Get rid of it entirely. Run from it. When you are on social media, you have all these other people who don't have any credentials or care about you that tell you what should be most important in your life. I just heard this study the other day about how what we hear first in the morning, or what we interact with first in the morning, and what we interact with last in the day affect us more than anything else all day long. And for most of us, social media, maybe the news, something like that. You get to choose what forms you. Another thing that forms us more than most is the people we're around. Who are your people? I say this to students all the time. I'm going to say it forever because I just believe it to be true. But show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Who you hang out with is who you become. About a year ago, my nephew, who's a freshman, he was trying to make some life changes, trying to really do some changes in his life. And we sat down. The first thing we said, write down your friends. Who do you hang out with? And he writes down all these names. And finally, we're like, okay, cross out any of these names, these kids that you know are doing drugs. And like, okay, cross out any of these names for these kids that you know hang out at the skate park. Like, okay, cross out that kid's name because I don't like him, right? And he was in a different place. I'm not saying you should do this with all your kids. I said, how many names you got left on there? He says, 2. Said, great. Those are your friends. Those other kids, you don't know them. You don't say hi to them in the hallway. You don't sit by them in school. You don't hang out with them. You don't know them. Because especially where he was at that time, we needed him to be with friends who were going to pull him up. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. It's just as true as for adults, as it is for kids. My friends, Michelle and Manuel, told me this story the other day. Their daughter, Gabby, who was in my youth group, who I love dearly, living in California, she's like, hey, Gabby found a church. And I was like, oh, awesome. I love it when our college kids find churches. It's hard. It's hard to do that, step out. And I said, oh, that's great. And Michelle said, yeah, we gave her your advice, and she decided to take it. And I thought for a second, I talk a lot. So I don't exactly remember what my advice was. I was like, what did I say? Must have been good. I should write it down this time. And I guess what I had told Michelle to transfer on to Gabby was this. I said, you are in the prime ages of life to meet your spouse. You are either going to meet him at the bar or at church. It's your choice. And she says, I'm going to meet him at church, and started going to church. Now, I would add to that, if you're writing this down, I would add to that where you meet him is probably where he's going to take you back to. Put that in your back pocket. Here's the other thing, and I got to go kind of quick. You have other voices in your life. You have other voices in your life that are speaking into you. It might be podcasts you listen to. It might be your place of work, the people you golf with, your bowling league, whoever you sit with at lunch, right? You have other voices that are speaking into you. But when it comes to your relationships, be careful what they're saying, okay? Anything that tells you your spouse, or really anyone in the world, is an object of your own desires, is a marker for your marriage's slow death or your relationship's slow death. Anytime we objectify anyone around us, we are adding cancer into that relationship. Now, I saw this on a silly level years ago. My wife used to love to watch The Bachelorette. And after a while, I felt like, I can't compete with these fools, right? I was like, this guy just took her on a private helicopter ride to have a picnic on a glacier. And Kayla's looking at me like, why don't you ever do that to me? It's like, I took you to Olive Garden last week. Like, that's... And in a silly way, though, I mean, it was kind of warping what her expectations were. And for us guys, it's the same. When you put anything in your life that would objectify your wife, your girlfriend, your fiance, whatever, you are already killing that relationship. And the biggest one is pornography. If you introduce pornography into your marriage, guys, you have doubled your chances of divorce. It is so important that we have people in our lives that can help us renew our minds, that can remind us of these lies and these myths that have creeped in. You have got to have good people, which is why you should be in some sort of small group. You don't have to join one here today, but you should find a group of people. And maybe you just, if you can't find one here today, maybe you grab some good friends, some people that you want to become like. You say, hey, can we start meeting? I need some people to speak truth into my life. The reality is we're so much more inclined to do what feels right over what we're told, which is why we need to have a lot of voices speaking the truth into us. Have you ever been like rock climbing or rappelling or anything like that, and you get to the top, which you're like, I did it, and then they're like, now come back down, and you're like, oh no. And what do they tell you to do? They're like, hey, lean back. Like all those handholds on the wall right there that got you up there, like let go of those and just lean back. It feels so unnatural. And a lot of the time, that's what being in a small group or having close relationships is like. Our good friends will speak truth into us, even the stuff we don't want to hear. Kayla and I were sitting on the front porch this summer, and she got a phone call from a friend who doesn't call weekly, let's say. They're not distant, but doesn't call weekly. And so she looks at me, she's like, hey, I think I'm going to take this. So she goes inside, and she's gone for like 20 or 30 minutes. She comes back, and I was like, is everything okay? She's like, yeah, their kids kind of in a mess. They needed some advice, how to handle this, yada, yada. And I said, this sounded kind of snarky, but she knew where it was coming from. I said, so why did she call you? And Kayla says, actually, I was kind of wondering that too, so I asked her. And this is why she called Kayla. She said, I knew what the right thing to do was, and I knew that some of the closest people around me would not tell me to do it. But I knew you would. And we need people in our lives like that. People that when we say, hey, I know, you can say, no, you don't know. Let me help you know. As we kind of turn for home here, you have these blue cards in your bulletin. They have next steps on it that do not apply to anything that I talked about because they were for Billy's message. However, I have some next steps for you. Also, if you have a prayer request, we just did a whole series on prayer. If you have a prayer request, please write that down in there. We have people who pray for those every single week. Not a single one goes by without getting prayed for. I absolutely promise you. But let's look at a couple things that maybe you could do this week that will benefit your relationships. One is, let's leave one of these myths or lies behind. Which one of these? The experience myth, I've experienced it, so I must be wiser. This time will be different. I know we fight about it all the time, but this time it'll be different. Maybe we leave that behind. I know now, so I'll do it better now. Just say, hey, you know what? I can't bring this into the next relationship with me. I can't bring this into the next friendship. I can't bring this into the next job. I can't bring this into my next semester at school. Leave one of those behind. Next, change the voices around you. And maybe just choose one. Maybe there's one friend that came up, or there's one form of social media that came up, or there's one news feed that came up, or there's something that comes up and you think, yeah, that's not who I want to be. I'm not telling you to leave everyone. I'm not telling you to turn off your phone forever. But what is a voice? What is a voice in your life that is telling you to be somebody you don't want to be? Last is this. Renew your mind by doing what you're told, not what you feel. We have to have voices in our lives that tell us the truth, the voices that tell us the hard things. You got to have somebody who says, hey, I know you don't want to hear this, but. And if you don't have that, let's find that. For a lot of us, it starts in a small group, and I'd encourage you to find one today. But you have got to have some voices in your lives, and when they talk, you need to listen. Not do what feels best. I'm going to turn this service back to Kyle Wolber and Brewster. I'm going to pray for us here, and then we're going to go eat some soup. So will you pray with me? Father, I thank you so much for today. God, I thank you for letting me get to speak today. And I ask, God, for your blessing on our relationships. I pray over broken relationships in this room. I pray that you will restore healing, that you will bring communication, that your truth will penetrate the hearts of people. God, I ask that you would give us courage to act on some of these things, that you would give us courage to ask for forgiveness, that you would give us courage to release responsibility from things. God, I pray that you would help us move on to our next steps. Rid us of voices that don't want us to be like you, Lord. Fill us with your truth and make us like you. And we ask for that in the powerful name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us today. Enjoy that soup, and we'll see you next week.